Today, sugar feels almost invisible in our lives. It's spooned into coffee without a second thought, baked into desserts, and hidden in foods we don't even associate with sweetness. It's cheap, everywhere, and often taken for granted. But there was a time when sugar wasn't ordinary at all. In fact, it was so rare, so valuable, and so powerful that people called it white gold. Kingdoms rose because of it, wars were fought over it, and millions of lives were shaped, often brutally, by the global hunger for sweetness. So, we'll travel back in time to uncover how a simple craving for sweetness turned sugar into one of the most powerful commodities in human history, right here on History of Simple Things. Sugar's story begins far from modern supermarkets. The earliest known sugar came from sugarcane, a tall tropical grass first cultivated in Southeast Asia and parts of India thousands of years ago. At the time, sugar wasn't a powder or crystal. It was more like a thick syrup, extracted by crushing cane and boiling the juice down. People chewed sugarcane for its sweetness or used the syrup sparingly, mostly as a medicine rather than a food. Sweetness itself was rare in the ancient world, and anything sweet was immediately seen as special. As trade routes expanded, sugar slowly traveled west. Arab traders played a major role in refining sugar production, developing better techniques to crystallize it and preserve it. They introduced sugarcane farming to the Middle East and parts of North Africa. Even then, sugar remained a luxury. It was expensive to grow, labor-intensive to process, and difficult to transport. Only the wealthy could afford it, and it was often stored in small chests like precious gems. When sugar finally reached Europe during the Middle Ages, its value skyrocketed. Europeans had never tasted anything like it. Honey had been the main sweetener for centuries, but sugar was cleaner, stronger, and more versatile. At first, it was sold in apothecaries, not grocery stalls. Doctors prescribed sugar to balance bodily humors, treat stomach problems, and even improve mood. It was seen as a healing substance, not a treat. Owning sugar was a status symbol, a sign that you had money, power, and access to global trade. By the 14th and 15th centuries, sugar became the ultimate symbol of wealth among Europe's elite. At royal banquets, sugar sculptures were crafted into elaborate shapes, castles, animals, even entire scenes, meant to be admired more than eaten. These displays were wildly expensive and deliberately wasteful, designed to show that the host could afford to literally consume luxury. Sugar wasn't just food. It was performance, power, and prestige all in one. The real transformation of sugar, however, came with European expansion overseas. As explorers reached the Atlantic islands and later the Americas, they discovered that sugarcane thrived in warm, tropical climates. Plantations began appearing in places like Madeira, the Caribbean, and Brazil. But sugar production at scale required enormous labor. Growing cane was grueling, harvesting was dangerous, and processing involved crushing machines and boiling vats that caused frequent injuries. Plantation owners needed a workforce that could be controlled completely, and this demand fueled one of the darkest chapters in human history. The transatlantic slave trade became inseparable from sugar. Millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly transported to work on sugar plantations. The conditions were horrific. Life expectancy on many plantations was shockingly low, and enslaved people were often worked to death and replaced rather than cared for. Sugar became cheaper for Europe precisely because it was paid for with human suffering elsewhere. The sweetness enjoyed in European teacups was inseparably linked to cruelty and exploitation. This is where sugar truly earned the name white gold. Like gold, it generated massive wealth. Entire colonial economies revolved around it. European empires taxed it, insured it, protected it with navies, and fought wars over it. Control of sugar islands meant control of trade routes and enormous profits. Ports grew rich, merchants built fortunes, and governments relied on sugar revenue to fund expansion and military power. Sugar also reshaped everyday life in Europe. As supply increased and prices slowly dropped, sugar moved from elite tables into middle-class homes. Tea, coffee, and chocolate, once bitter and unfamiliar, became popular largely because sugar made them enjoyable. Breakfast habits changed. Desserts became common. Even concepts of pleasure and reward shifted, as sweetness became associated with comfort, celebration, and indulgence. By the 18th and 19th centuries, sugar consumption exploded. Industrialization brought new refining technologies, making sugar cheaper and more abundant than ever before. What had once been locked away in treasure chests now filled jars in ordinary kitchens. But this abundance came with consequences. Diets changed rapidly, teeth decayed more often, and sugar began to play a role in emerging health issues that people were only starting to understand. Today, the idea of sugar as white gold sounds almost strange. It's no longer rare or glamorous. In fact, it's often blamed for health problems and avoided by people trying to eat better. But understanding sugar's past helps explain why it became so central to global trade and daily life in the first place. Its value wasn't just in its taste, it was in what it represented: power, connection, and control over resources and people. Sugar's story is a reminder that everyday items can carry extraordinary histories. Something as simple as a spoonful of sweetness once drove exploration, financed empires, and reshaped entire societies. It influenced where people lived, how they worked, and even how they suffered. When we call sugar white gold, we're not just talking about wealth. We're talking about the immense human cost hidden behind a familiar flavor. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.